Hey guys, it's Neon, and we're going to talk a little bit about Doctor Who Series 11. We haven't really been talking about Doctor Who because there's not a lot of Doctor Who news, but apparently the showrunners are starting to figure out that Series 11 didn't work very well, at least for a lot of Doctor Who fans. A lot of the audience didn't think it worked. Didn't think it worked very well, so they're going to try to revert to form, go back to the series roots. Series 11 was a pretty radical departure for Doctor Who, not just because of there being a female Time Lord, but just the tone of the show was very, very different from everything that came before it. It felt like a totally different show. It felt like it was more of a drama with a little bit of sci-fi thrown in. It was boring. It was freaking boring. And that was a criticism that I had pretty much since the beginning. And I actually was one of the few people who was looking forward, I think, to seeing what Chibnall could do with Doctor Who, seeing what Jodie Whittaker could do with Doctor Who. And I was very, very bored by season 11. So bored, in fact, that I think I ducked out after episode 7 and came back for the New Year's special. And Doctor Who at one point was like the only show I watched on live TV every week without fail. Like it was appointment TV for me. I watch very little TV on average because I'm so busy, but I always made time for Doctor Who. And to have Series 11 be as pedestrian as it was, it really pissed me off. And I made some videos about it, and those videos pissed off some people who defended Series 11. And welcome to the internet, right? So here we are. So they're sort of admitting that they made mistakes, but not quite, right? We saw earlier that they were going to bring the Jadoon back to Doctor Who. I think they're trying to bring back some familiar elements because the show veered very, very far from the Russell T Davies and Moffat era. It was barely recognizable other than having a TARDIS. I mean, we had a brand new Doctor, we had brand new companions, and other than a rusty Dalek showing up at the end of the series, we didn't have any of the classic villains. Now, I understand that was intentional because they were trying to break away from the previous series, but it made it very, very hard to connect that this Doctor was supposed to be Capaldi's character, who was Matt Smith's character, who was David Tennant's character, etc., etc. It felt like a totally different show, and not in a good way. Not in a good way, in my opinion. It didn't feel like a totally different show in a good way. So now they're apparently going to go back to what worked in previous incarnations of Doctor Who, which I think most fans would appreciate. Again, the biggest complaint I've heard, now there are people who have had problems with Jodie Whittaker being the Doctor, with there being a female Doctor, but I don't think it's the major criticism, right? And I totally understand where these people are coming from. I mean, the Doctor has historically been a male character for 50 plus years. They're allowed to feel that way. I think they're allowed to feel that way. But the major criticism I've heard about the series from other people is that the show is just boring as fuck. I mean, it's a very boring show. So hopefully they're gonna, try to do a course correction with Series 12. But it's so weird because, they kept denying that there was a problem. They denied that the audience was bored. They denied that even though Whittaker's debut episode hit a record high number of viewers, that it dropped off a cliff in the weeks and months as the series dragged on because people were freaking bored. They were dropping Doctor Who. So yeah, let's kind of go back to what works, right? So this is coming from Screen Rant. Doctor Who season 12 will be more like the Davies and Moffat eras. Hopefully, because that's not a good look. A lot of people obviously are not on board with this take on the Doctor. It's boring. Early signs seem to indicate that the upcoming Doctor Who season 12 will return to more familiar ground and perhaps even feeling more like past eras under showrunners Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat. When previous Dr. Peter Capaldi and showrunner Stephen Moffat opted to depart the iconic series, almost simultaneously, a period of great change was inevitable for Doctor Who. And I do, again, I'm not opposed to change. I actually was kind of excited because toward the end, Moffat was kind of, I think, phoning it in. The last season, especially of his tenure, was not spectacular. Doctor Who was getting a little stale. It needed something. I don't think Chris Chibnall is what it needed. Chris Chibnall's forte does not seem to be science fiction. He seems to be more preoccupied with people having conversations in coffee shops, than bouncing around the universe, dealing with alien threats. So Moffat was replaced by Chibnall, who in turn cast Jodie Whittaker as the first actress to helm the TARDIS in the 50-plus year history. This alone was enough change for some fans to cope with, but Chibnall opted to make his mark upon Doctor Who with a debut season that stood distinctly apart from the show's past. That was a huge mistake. I mean, I'm not even going to mince words. That was a huge mistake. It was a big enough change to get people used to a female doctor, but to change the entire tone of the show, to drop most of the classic adversaries, a smarter move so that there was at least some connective tissue would have been probably to, maybe keep Bill and Nardole from the previous series and bring them into this series so we knew this was the same character. There was nothing about this show that really connected to previous iterations of Doctor Who. It almost felt like a reboot. It felt like a complete reboot, and that not in a good way. And it was boring. It was really boring. So hopefully they address the preachiness of this series of Doctor Who. In addition to the new cast of characters, Chibnall's Doctor Who employed brand new filming techniques. They did. It looked more cinematic. But again, it was obvious that the budget was cut, adopted a different visual style and featured music from different composers. Yeah, Murray Gold was gone. He was sorely missed. Not to knock anyone else who is picking up for Murray Gold, but Murray Gold was amazing and a really tough act to follow. The music for this series of Doctor Who, for Series 11, was very, very forgettable. The only shout out I really can give the current composer is that I do like that they use the classic Doctor Who theme. I do like the intro quite a bit. I like the classic intro. Other than that, there are no memorable themes. You compare it with Murray Gold, where every Doctor had their own theme, the companions had their own theme. You were humming some of the music, and Murray Gold was basically like the John Williams of Doctor Who, and there's nothing like that in the new show. It's very, very bland. I mean, like elevator music. So Chibnall intentionally avoided utilizing any established villains, huge mistake, instead introducing a whole new crop of alien troublemakers, like that guy with teeth on his face. That was not a good replacement for the classic villains. Sorry, I'll take the Cyberman any day. And quite unlike the showrunners who preceded him, structured his debut season into standalone episodes with very little in the way of overarching plot lines. Again, this was kind of, I understand it to a degree, but it was also a miscalculation because when you do the standalone episodes, it makes it easier every week for people to drop the show because they don't have to tune in next week to see what's going to happen. It's like, okay, it's over and done. I'm bored. I'm out. Whereas with, Moffat seasons, especially, there was always, every season had an overarching plot, right? They always kind of set up the plot in the first episode of the series, and then at about the midway point, it would pick up momentum, and then they would resolve it in the series finale. There was no overarching plot in Series 11. And again, that makes it, so much easier for people to just drop the show every week. And I ran out of give a shit, personally. I didn't care by the 6th or 7th episode at all about the show. And the only reason I watched was I was hoping it would get better, and it didn't. And I was bored and I was out, and I can't believe that I actually dropped Doctor Who. Again, one of my all-time favorite shows, one I watched even when it wasn't phenomenal, during Capaldi's last 2 years. I guess it was 2/3 of his run. The show was kind of boring too, but it still kept my interest enough to watch it every week, and that is not the case with Series 11. This is interesting though. While some fans appreciated the fresh approach, it could even be argued that new viewers were drawn in as a result, given the ratings increase. No, I think people were watching it. I think there's some juggling with the numbers, and I think people were watching it because they were kind of hoping it would get better, but there was a ratings increase initially because it was a big deal that the Doctor was a woman. We had a new showrunner. However, the ratings did drop off a cliff, and they're not mentioning that. Others felt alienated by the all-new Doctor Who. Come the season's conclusion, the storylines were generating more controversy online than the Doctor's gender, which was swiftly rendered a non-issue thanks to Jodie Whittaker's widely praised performance. That could also be argued. I think Jodie Whittaker is okay, but she seems like she's really trying to mimic David Tennant. too much, you know. But again, that's like the only indication that this is the same character that David Tennant was. I mean, I think if we had gotten like Tilda Swinton in here or something, nobody would really be criticizing Jodie Whittaker at all. Tilda Swinton's absolutely amazing, and she would have made an amazing Doctor. So whether in response to that criticism or because Chibnall believed his second season can't afford to be less boldly unique, no, it's called ratings. The ratings were dropping. BBC is probably panicking because they're like, what the hell did you do? And again, initially the ratings were up over Capaldi's last season, but they did drop pretty quickly as people, you know, as the series dragged on. And this is not all trolling. I'm sorry. A lot of people did not like this series at all compared to previous series. So they say it's going to revert to a more familiar format, more closely resemble the Davies and Moffat years. That's a smart business move. For a start, there are going to be more returning villains from Doctor Who canon, like the Jadoon, and this process began with the dramatic return of the Daleks on the New Year's Day special. With its rusty, hastily constructed lone Dalek, the special felt like a rebirth for the infamous exterminators and was one of the best received episodes of Whittaker's tenure thus far. This is one of the best. They actually took the audience review down. This is one of the best received episodes. Yeah, on the critical score, but the audience score, average rating 1.4 out of 5, and they actually took the audience score down. But some of these, like, oh my God, it's really bad. It's a worst episode ever made that I've seen on television. This is Doctor Who. Yeah, so... you know, some people said it was okay, but they actually took the score down. At one point, I think it was like 11% or some ridiculousness for audience score. So Rotten Tomatoes has been juggling the numbers a little bit, especially with the audience score, because they're trying to cut down on trolling. So continuing the pattern, the BBC has confirmed that Doctor Who Season 12 will see the return of the Jadoon. These Davies-era baddies were featured during David Tennant's time in the TARDIS and were an intergalactic mercenary police force that the Doctor had a certain distaste for. The Jadoon have featured minor roles, blah, 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 blah. Chibnall's decision to give Doctor Who's biggest baddies a rest during Season 11 was perhaps a wise one, no. It was not. You lost a lot of viewers. As some had certainly suffered from overuse, but with Season 12 not set to air until 2020, viewers can likely expect the return of more familiar enemies than just the Jadoon. Yeah, it seems like we've heard rumors that they were going to bring back River Song. We've heard, which I seriously doubt. I mean, River Song was, let's face it, River Song was Stephen Moffat's OC, right? I don't think River Song is going to come back, but who knows? Doctor Who's Season 12 is also certain to feature more long-term story arcs than last year's run. The Moffat era, in particular, was sometimes guilty of getting too bogged down in complex season-spanning storylines, and therefore, it's easy to understand Chris Chibnall stripping back the show to its core components. However, a single long-running plot thread was introduced in Whittaker's second episode, The Timeless Child, much to fans' annoyance. Yes, this mystery wasn't picked up on again for the remainder of the season, nor in the New Year's special. Assuming Chibnall plans to avoid the issues that hampered Matt Smith's 11th Doctor, where certain plot points were triggered and then abandoned, the Timeless Child arc is something Doctor Who Season 12 is destined to delve into with far more conviction, offering a deeper level of storytelling, blah, 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 blah. Please come back and watch Doctor Who. That's what they're saying with this, right? Please come back, fans. Please come back. We're going to try to fix it. We're going to try to fix Doctor Who, but we're not going to admit that the show needs fixing. So I really think this is damage control. I think this is them teasing the Jadoon especially is a way for them to try to get the older fans back on board with the show. Like I said in the previous video, it's kind of like the member berries, right? Remember from South Park? Remember the Jadoon? Remember the Jadoon? Remember David Tennant? You like David Tennant, right? Well, these Rhino guys, they were remember those guys? They were in the David Tennant shows. Oh, you like those guys? You'll come back. You'll watch Doctor Who again. Yeah, I mean, if they can return to formula, I don't give a shit who's in the TARDIS. I mean, you know, if they can kind of return to what made Doctor Who worth watching, New Who worth watching, you know, I think even a lot of people who have a problem with a woman in the TARDIS could look beyond that, you know, if the show is good. But it's a double whammy. It was a huge change to put Whittaker in the TARDIS, and then the show was just not good. And it was very preachy. It was very ham-fisted. And again, before people jump, they're like, well, Doctor Who's always had politics. Yes, Doctor Who has always had some politics, but its primary goal was always at least in New Who, his primary goal was always to entertain, to tell an entertaining science fiction action story. And with Jodie Whittaker's season, with Chibnall's season, it felt like its primary goal was to educate people about how awful men are, specifically white dudes, right? That was my takeaway from Series 11. The politics were very, very heavy-handed. The show was very preachy, and it was almost like the Magic School Bus. Like it felt like edutainment, you know, and I don't think people want to be preached at. They just want to watch a good science fiction romp, you know, shut their brains off for a little bit and just watch something and enjoy it. And it was very hard to enjoy Series 11 because I was always cognizant that it was trying to lecture me on things. And I'm like, I don't want that. I just want to watch a show. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe season 12 will be better. If it's going to be better, I blame the BBC. I think that probably some higher ups were like, you need to, you know, the buzz is bad. The buzz is bad on this show, and it's going to, you know, get the show canceled if you don't knock it off. You know, it's already a very expensive show to produce, and, you know, I can't imagine there being much merchandise for this iteration of Doctor Who. I mean, we joked before. I'm like, you know, what are they going to do? Have like a coffee shop playset where the companions can sit around and talk to each other? You know, I mean, that's just not, there's nothing really to make any merchandise for, because they really didn't have any major set pieces or major monsters or anything like that, you know, compared to previous seasons where you had, you know, the Cybermen, the Daleks, and the Weeping Angels, and you can make merchandise of all these characters, which I think, you know, helped the BBC keep the show on the air. And that's not the case with Series 11. It was a very pedestrian, low rent. It was a very low rent show, and they can do better, and hopefully they do better. I mean, I would love to come back to Doctor Who and be like, you know what, I was wrong. Season 12 makes up for season 11. I would love to be able to make that video. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to sign off for now. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, rants, gaming videos, art videos, and more. This has been Neon for Clownfish TV. I will talk to you later. Hey guys, thanks for watching Clownfish TV. Please consider supporting the channel. Go to clownfishsupport.com. That's clownfishsupport.com. And if you want to join our community, go to clownfishtalk.com. That's clownfishtalk.com. Please subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. We will talk to you next time.